Welcome to Creative Courage Chats, a search for a new understanding of creativity and problem solving. I'm Alex Raffy. Hi, everybody. Another Creative Courage Chat here. I'm here with somebody I've known for over 20 years. It's been like 22. You don't look it. I do, but you definitely don't look it. You still look like the same way you did when we worked at the paper. But, in my previous chapter of my life, I worked at the Henderson Home newspaper. I was a graphic designer, and I was the editorial cartoonist for them. And Kevin here, Kevin Fiddler, he was the sports writer. And I think you were like right to over here to me. I think
yes,
over here.
yes,
And,
I was on your.
I even did a little caricature of you for one of your sections of the paper and everything.
Twice, actually. You did one for when we did the Movie Buffs film column with
that's
me and
right.
Rob Weidenfeld, and then you did the Fiddler's Flick one where
that's right.
You gave me I looked far more flattering in the pictures that you drew than I did in real life. So
Sure,
I don't know if that's a good thing. If it was a
Oh,
caricature and I still look goofier in real life than the caricature, that's a plus.
But anyway, so we're talking today with you. You're a sports journalist. You're a journalist, but you're also mainly a sports journalist, right?
And a sports journalist, and then film. I still do the film stuff.
Film critic, and you do that kind of stuff. And you're also a teacher.
Correct.
Which is a very noble profession, and you're very good at that. And I know I've done actually my workshop for you and for some of your students in the past, and that was pretty cool. It was a fun day. But yeah, can you give, because you're very much a Las Vegas guy, so can you give people a little bit of history about you?
Yeah, sure. So, I lived in Vegas when I was younger too. I went to elementary school here. I went to Nate Mack actually, back when I was in kindergarten through up till like around sixth grade. And then we moved back to Chicago, where my family was from. And then, so I went to high school and college out there. And then my first job, basically, I had a little bit of a job here in TV production as soon as I moved out here after graduation. But about 5 months later, I was hired at the newspaper, and that's kind of kicked it all off. So I was at the home news for 5+ years. I got to work with Alex and a bunch of other really, really awesome personalities. I met one of my best friends in the entire world, Josh, there, who to this day is someone that he's been there through thick and thin. And we're there for about 5 years. And then I left because as a baseball guy, I played baseball in college. I just wanted to be a coach. And so for me, it was a conflict of interest to be a journalist covering high school sports at the home news and be a coach at the high school level. So I left to become, obviously the foot in the door would become a teacher to be able to coach. And what happened was I got my foot in the door as a teacher and found out that I love teaching as much or more than coaching. So I've been with the district ever since. And I've been lucky enough to, whether it's, with teaching, I've taught some pretty great kids that have gone on to do some really excellent things in the media. Cassie Soto over at the RJ, she's covering the Raiders right now. And so it's weird watching her throw out and cover the Raiders right now, because she's one of my former students. That was my first class that I taught video production and film with, actually. And so she's doing that. I've got another one that's over at UFC doing the digital media. And at the same time, I was able to coach some really great individuals. I'm a 4th generation Cub fan, and I was lucky enough that my 3rd year, I left the newspaper to go try and make an impact with baseball. And I ended up became a coach for a young kid that most Vegas fans would know him as a kid named Chris Bryant, who ended up playing with the Chicago Cubs. And as a 4th generation Cub fan, I got to watch a kid that I got to coach win the National League MVP and lead the Cubs to their first World Series in 109 years. So
that's
something
fantastic.
that my great grandparents didn't even get a chance to enjoy. And they would have enjoyed it, because one of my family heirlooms is actually the Babe Ruth called shot scorecard that my great grandpa left for me. So it's
awesome.
been kind of a fun journey. Got to see some randoms and experience some cool people along the way. And obviously you get to impact as many lives as possible, whether it's in the classroom or outside of the classroom on the athletic fields.
Now you do a podcast too.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And what is that?
It's called the Pinwheels and Ivy Podcast. It actually had to do with, because I coached Chris. They had me on the show because the Las Vegas had hosted the Major League winter meetings. And so they wanted me to do correspondence work for them. So I was down there live on the floor, running around like a fool, and it just kind of clicked. And so they had me on a couple more times. Then I'm kind of like a leech, I guess. I kind of stick to you and I don't let go. So they couldn't let me off the show. And now we've been doing the show together for 2 years, 2+ years now. It's called the Pinwheels and Ivy Pod, though. It covers both Chicago White Sox baseball and Chicago Cubs baseball. So right now, both teams are in first place. And the season's short, obviously, but it's been actually really exciting for us because we've been able to really kind of enjoy the dialogue with some of the listeners who are very passionate. Chicago sports fans in general are. So we've, all the way from the West out here in the desert, I'm still able to interact with some of my old peeps, my old family from, way back. And so it's been pretty exciting to be able to do that and obviously share some stuff and be able to kind of maybe make people laugh a little bit too, because I'm sometimes the goofiest guy out there.
Right. I think it's interesting though. It's really a good example of being somebody with, I think you're a passionate guy. You've had a lot of passion for certain things in your life, and started with sports. And it's interesting that when you're young, you define what you're going to be in your mind. You have this dream of who it is. But if you have a brain in your head, you follow whatever the heat is, wherever you're excited about, and sometimes it leads you in interesting directions, and it leads you into new things. And I like that you fell into becoming a teacher in a sense, because you discovered something on your way to something else. And isn't that kind of how it seems to work? I mean, you never know what you're going to find unless you start going, right? I mean,
And I always, as a big Joseph Campbell advocate, whether, teaching, whether as an English teacher or just as someone that just enjoys literature too, it would always the idea that, you don't go into the forest where there's a path. You go into you go in there where there is no path, to the deepest, darkest entrance where nobody's been, because if you go and there's a path there, it's not yours. That's somebody else's path.
right.
So you really want to find that that non-opening, and that's where you push yourself through. And I think when you do that, you find on the other side of that, just that initial push and shove, you find bliss. I think I don't think I could ask for much better of an experience than to be able to see some of these guys that I've coached, or these students that I've taught, or just to be able to watch these. I have a young filmmaker that debuts his first film he did last year down at the Eclipse, and it was his first feature film, and he was able to debut it. So to be able to be a part of those types of moments, that wasn't expected on the journey. I think at that age I was 20, 25, 26, 27, 28 or whatever it was. And you're kind of chasing ego at that time, because you want to be the big successful, whatever you want to have. And then when you get there and you realize that it's not about that, it's about something completely different. That's where that journey turns on you. And it rights your ship a little bit. It takes you from one mindset to a completely different mindset. And you're allowed to, it helps you kind of expand on who your the real person you are is, because you find out you have a lot more depth than you realize. I think that was the case for me, at least.
So it's an interesting responsibility, right? When you're talking to young minds that are super creative, that want to do this kind of stuff in their lives, and you're the one guiding this insane, it's almost like these kids, when they're younger, it's like they're riding a wagon train down a hill with no horses, and no reins. There's like, no, they just go. They just want to go, and they don't want to be stifled, and they don't want to be, they know everything, and they, and a lot of times I think that it's interesting because, I've always talked about that, you need an ego to be creative, but you need to earn it. You need to kind of earn it. It's important to know it's there, but it's also not important to not think you know everything. There, I'm always saying humility is boring, because you need to have people that are, they need to have the courage to try things and to dive into things, not knowing what's there. But you have to also pay attention and learn from other people and listen to other people. So what do you think in your experience, just when you're talking to young creatives or people that are, so driven and head full of flames and fire and everything, wanting to get a story out, how do you kind of calm that down a little bit?
It's kind of funny. You kind of hit the hammer on the nail with that. Their hair's on fire constantly. They're just, they're running around like a Muppet, that's left the hand, so to speak. They're just doing their thing.
I like that you said you hit the hammer on the nail, or you hit the nail on or I don't think you said it right. Maybe you said it right. But I was picturing it the other way around, and that's what it feels like. There's nails trying to bang hammers.
Sometimes it is. Sometimes it's many nails
like.
Banging the hammer out, like hitting us. Yeah. So especially when you've got like 30 kids and they're all running around.
Yeah.
But I think the biggest part, I think with that is, I preach it too in class, is the idea of the beginner's mind. When you look at an expert generally tends to think that they've got it all figured out, that they've got the answers, that they've got all the experience they need. And so when you have that, their options are limited. Their ceiling stops because they've stopped learning. But even the eldest, most veteran individual, if they take the idea of, a beginner's mind, which is I've never experienced this before. Yes, I may have read this book with you when I was a sophomore, but I'm a senior now, and I've not read it since I was, I'm a senior now. I'm 2 years older. I've seen something different, or I'm 40 years old now. Reading on the road has a completely different meaning for me. And so when you do something, you do it like it's the first time. And so the experience of a beginner's mind, constantly the ceiling it just continues to elevate, because you can continually learn things that you didn't see before because you weren't looking. And if you're an expert, you stop looking. When you're a beginner, it's like a child on the first day of Christmas. Everything is just awe-inspiring, and it tends to create that general excitement for things, because you have that childlike wonder every time you do something, no matter how many times you've done it. And so that's the biggest thing I think I tell the students, is that when you guys are going through this, because again, my old school, they went through 3 different teachers before they got to me, teaching very similar stuff, but they'd never learned it with me, and they had never learned it with them. And so you want them to constantly be evolving. And, it's like watching a film. You go see, when you watch, Memento is a great example of that to me. Christopher Nolan's Memento. It's a film that when you watch the first time, you're told basically a story in reverse. And then when you watch it a second time, you know the story, and you pick up more than a few things the second time, and then the third time. And so it's like that when you're talking about creativity as well. You want to make sure that the kids are not just sticking to the status quo, but doing things as if it's the second time, the third time, making it the first time, even though it's the fifth time.
And I think it's also interesting, because I talk to a lot of young people that are creatives and interested in creativity, and I get asked questions, and sometimes it's interesting to me that what's inside of you is so great and pure and amazing, but it's your ability to execute it where you need to pay attention and learn, right? Is this process? For me, an example that had happened to me personally was I took a creative writing class one time, and I had this story in my head, and it was so peculiar, and it was totally influenced by like Monty Python and strange stuff. But it turned into something, and I remember writing it and thinking, wow, this is so good. I love this so much. And I just wrote it. And it had this story of a man who didn't know where he was going with his life, and he was obsessed with bending paper clips into different shapes that still worked as paper clips. And he had these elaborate paper clips everywhere, and he had this horrible job, and he hated, and there's a big story about what his life was like, and it was this dystopian society he lived in. Anyway, so there's a big story, and I really liked it, and I was so excited to turn it in. And when I turned it in, everybody hated it. Everybody thought it was terrible. And I remember them like, did anybody have a critique of the story? And everybody was like, it didn't make any sense. It was hard to read. The grammar was terrible. And it's just this whole thing, and everybody hated it. And then the teacher, God bless the teacher, said, well, why don't we try this? Alex, why don't you read the story? And so I read it. And when I read it, everybody loved it, because it was they were able to experience it in the way that I wanted it to be experienced. And it's just interesting to me that your inability to write or to understand the proper ways and the structure of writing, nobody gets it. Nobody will get it. And I think that's sometimes what people are carrying with them is that they have this fire in them, and it's all great and beautiful, but when they express it through film or through whatever it is, in my case it was writing, it missed horribly. And all it takes is a few times where you try to do it and people tell you you're terrible, where you might be discouraged enough to where you won't try anymore.
Well, that's the most terrifying aspect of creating, putting yourself out there. And that's, especially, I hate to say that we live in a day and age where it's risky to put yourself out there now. It's risky to take chances because art is so subjective. When you're creating something today, you're not entirely sure who you might capture and who you might offend at this point. And we have such a society that right now tends to lash out at things they don't understand. No different than if you use a word that's a large word from a dictionary that sounds like a negative connotation, but they don't realize that it actually is a positive word. You don't apply the standards of that. And it's the same like with an artist. You put yourself out there, and because it's so subjective, someone might not understand it. And it's not necessarily their job to understand the art, but it's to appreciate that art comes from within and that it becomes something of a cathartic, tool, especially now, obviously going through what we're going through in society right now and during, the pandemic and whatnot. You'd think that more art would be created because in tough times, I think that the human condition creates more art when we're in pain, generally than when we're in joy. And it's one of those things where to put yourself out there to really maybe showcase your fears and your what terrifies you, or something that really pulls at you, whatever baggage you have that you kind of throw out there. And, I think you said it in your last show, you like to, whatever, you draw something and, you purge and you put it up on the shelf and you walk away.
Yeah.
And it is how you've got to create that way, but it's terrifying to think that when you do put yourself out there, because I think everybody does, you do want search for validation, in a way. And just, you might have an ego as an artist, but at the same time, you also have you're self-conscious quite a bit, even with an ego. Cause sometimes, you feel and you hear and it's just everything kind of comes together at the same time, where it's terrifying to think that someone's going to be seeing you at your most bare. And when you're at your most bare, which is when you're really producing your best work, you're laid out there on the altar of judgment, I guess you could say. And it's terrifying.
You actually do this all the time anyway, through journalism, right? You have to communicate with like cutting clarity, right? Otherwise, because I heard it described to me one time. Bert Breed wrote me a letter one time, the guy that did Outland and Bloom County, because I asked him advice on something when I screwed up, and he said basically that, the Achilles heel of any artist is a lack of clarity. You need to be sure, or have at least know what you're saying, and have it well thought out. If there's an argument you want to have, you need to have empathy for the other side and see it through their eyes too a little bit, and kind of try to express yourself in a way, not saying that don't express yourself in a way that isn't completely true and full, and don't be cautious, but be informed. Don't be glib, and don't lead with an insult. That's, with a lot of people seem to do, or, it always happens, or, if you're going to write something and you're going to have the word libtard, or if you're going to write something and say like, Trumpers or whatever it is, you've already established something and you've turned off an entire audience, but if you have a point that's worth expressing, I think all points are worth expressing, but I mean, but if you want a point that you want people to actually consider and take seriously, I think those are things, you're right, and you need to take it into consideration. And that's like a dying art now. I mean, the ability to actually not be biased in the things you're writing, it's almost impossible for some people. And I find it difficult sometimes to try to, I've taken this role now in my way of expressing, where I've decided that it's, I don't want to get into politics, but right now everything is so volatile and poison and venomous in the world, the way people are, and everybody's so positive that they're right. I focused a lot on the fact that it really doesn't matter anymore. What matters is that we all have to live together, because the other side isn't going to disappear. They're just not going to up and vanish. Yeah. We got to actually live with each other. And I've worked in plenty of places with people I hated and didn't like at all, but we could get things done. We can figure it out. We can sit there and work together. I don't have to buy you a birthday present, but I can figure out how to solve a problem with you if I'm willing to.
That's something I cover with my students quite a bit. You don't have to be best friends with someone to work well with them. You don't have to be best friends with someone to be a good teammate. You don't have to any of those things. You just have to be professional, and you just have to have, like you said, empathy. And I think that, I mean, obviously, we're friends on social media, and you see some of that stuff on there. It's hard. It's difficult. I mean, they used to say class and character is easy because it's just doing the right thing. Doing the right thing is not hard. But in this day and age, the temptation to go beyond that sometimes, I think, is what makes it very difficult to voice your opinion and to speak to multiple audiences, because of, like you said, with bias and whatnot. And I think, it's something that I'm trying to do a little bit more frequently. In fact, all the stuff that I've not posted or published a single piece of my work since the shutdown. I have felt that it wasn't, I had plenty of opinions, and other than the little posts that I throw on social media when I'm frustrated, which I need to be better with. I've actually kept everything that I've written to myself. I don't think it's the time nor the place to share that kind of stuff.
But you're writing.
So, yeah. And so I'm at home and I'm writing, and I share, I keep it and I read it to myself and I go back and read it. But, I think that a year or two from now, when everything is in a better place, it'll be more of a trip to go back and then read, how I felt on March 25th when we had no idea what was coming tomorrow, and that we were stuck and we were, freaking out about toilet paper and bleach, and that whole feeling of insecurity. It did produce. I feel like I again, it's stuff that I really am fond of. I just don't feel like it's the time to share it. And I think that in this time period, it's very difficult for a lot of people to want to share, because you want the impact of what you're saying to have meaning. And I think right now everybody's looking for the mistake and something that the mistake in the logic. They're trying to find the flaw in the reason. And it's just not the time to share it. So instead, I just, you hammer away and you crank out some stuff, and you tuck it away and you save it. And
I wrestle with that concept, though. I don't know if I'm not sure. I see what you're saying, but I don't know if I agree with the fact that you shouldn't share it. Because it's like, I kind of think like, where is it going? Well, actually, no, I do understand, because you're a teacher and you have to deal with a lot of, there's politics involved in kind of your world. And there's a lot of students that follow you probably and look up to you, and it makes it difficult to share those kinds of things, because right now it is so volatile. So you're in a position of authority that kind of makes it difficult for you. But I do prefer people sharing everything that they feel, because I feel like that's just more content for all of us to kind of absorb and take in. But I do understand what you're saying. So yeah, I processed that in my whole discussion. I went back and forth, but I'm on your side. I was going to argue against it. Now I'm back on your side on that. It's interesting too to me that you wanted to be a coach and you ended up being a coach too. They're just not in the way you probably imagined, right? Because you are a coach.
Mm-hmm. Oh, absolutely.
This time, right? And all those skills, you probably use those that you would use anyway. You probably use them all the time.
In fact, that's the hard part about being a writer and being a coach, is that especially, you're dealing with some high school boys. You sometimes have to peel back your vocabulary. That's actually the hardest thing. I'm out there, and I use this, I say something about a paradigm shift, and it looks, the look I get from 95% of the ball players, they're like, Coach, there's an arm growing out of your forehead right now, legitimately, because you just used the word, don't have our phones, we can't look it up. I don't know what that means. And so that actually makes it a little bit of a chore, just because I got to, and then when I say that in front of my class, it's different, because my class, they're specifically joining our program to be a part of that. So like, they are students that are on that level. Yeah, so I have to like flip the switch a little bit.
I'm the scenario where you would use a paradigm shift when talking about sports to athletes is so good. I'm totally curious about what that conversation was about and what you were talking about at that moment, because that's kind of what thing about sports. And I think that the interesting to me is the greatest thing about sports is kind of the sports, but there's so much more in sports. Now I come from soccer background and everything, but there's so much you can learn about life through sports. And it's such a great example, a metaphor of humanity and what we should be doing. And the whole example that you were saying earlier about, you could be on a team and hate, if you're in a football game, maybe the guy who's blocking you, if you're a quarterback, you could hate that guy. But when you're on the field, you love that guy because you have to, because you have a common goal, right? No pun intended, but you all have a common goal and you're working together towards something. And all of a sudden, the only thing that matters is the game. And it does, all the other stuff kind of takes a pause at the moment. And then of course, when the game's over, you go to the locker room and you probably get back into the thing, but there's a switch that goes off, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I've coached with guys that I didn't like as adults, and we worked fine together. It's tough sometimes, but you model the behavior that you'd like to expect from your players and your students. And so, just like as a teacher, there are people that you might not, or if you're in, PR and you're working with someone that you don't deal with well on a regular basis, but they're necessary and you need to work, you kind of, I think that's an ultimate sign of maturity, is when you can let bygones be bygones for the common goal. And sometimes I think that that's lost because a lot of times we don't want to give an inch. But that's like the big part about.
Because you're right, because it seemed like weakness to some people.
Mm-hmm. Right.
It's actually strength and maturity.
and that's what Bruce Lee talks about, water being adaptive. Water doesn't, runs into a rock. It doesn't stop when it sees a rock. It says, oh, I quit. Water finds ways. It goes around it. Sometimes even with persistence, it goes through it. And over, that's the idea of adaptivity, is and that's whether it's a coach or whether you're a teacher, whether you're an artist, whether you're a writer, whether you're, whether you work at Allstate. The idea that you have to be persistent to have the success or whatever you want to call it, or to produce that you want, it does take that persistence. You're not going to finish a novel if you can't write more than 20 pages. You have to finish the job. And that's the big part about it, is just to stare it down and to have that persistence and that adaptivity. And whether you're working with someone that you don't like, or whether it's in a rough condition, maybe you got a rough boss. I tell my students, you're not going to like your boss all the time. And there's always a difference between a boss and a leader. A leader's out front, a boss stands at the back and points. And you've got these different dynamics that the students need to, they learn from the experience that they have from all the different adults in their lives. That's the biggest thing ever, I think, is for them. And in my class, obviously, because it's video production, we have news teams. We have groups that have to work together. They put together the news every single day for our news broadcasts as well. And if those 8 students can't figure it out together, I'm going to get a bad product. And then, they're going to face the wrath of me, because I'm not getting the product that I'm expecting as their executive producer, and they're not producing it as producers. And so they learned that even a kid that you don't really like, you can work well with someone. And right. It turns out that they find out that they actually don't not like the student. They just had a perception of the student. And then when you work together and you go to hell and back a little bit, you come back and you have a different respect for someone when you've gone there and back with each other. So that's the beautiful part about sports, especially to me too, but also just that news environment. We saw it. At the news, how many times, you've probably heard it more than a few times, where there was a phone flying somewhere. Cause there was an argument maybe between, I wouldn't say Ray and I, cause Ray and I never argued, but more than a few times you heard the chatter, the heat of the battle. We got a deadline. Let's go. And then, as soon as it's out, as soon as the pages are out,
Bowman,
I'm sorry for yelling. Yeah. As soon as it's the bill, I'm sorry for yelling. And then you're ready to go again. And you're like, let's go get some lunch. Let's go across the street. Let's go to Green Valley Ranch. Let's go get some lunch. It's just because you get in the heat of the battle. And if it's kind of like me and my Italian family, when you lose your temper, you yell like the Dickens. And then when it's over, arm around each other, let's go back to work. Like, it's part of that process. Is it professional? Not all the time, but a newsroom is it's not a place for the weak of heart. And neither is, a really highly competitive environment in any way. And so
even when we're really close with people personally, but then you have to work with them professionally, it's difficult, because now all of a sudden opinions matter more readily, because you're trying to come up with a solution, and it's harder. When you actually have good relationships, sometimes it's harder because those people know you so well, and and if they piss you off, well, they should know better. So it makes it worse. You know what I mean? It's almost like being, I don't know. Just like in relationships. You know what I mean? It's the same kind of thing, but it's so complicated. But at the end of the day, we can't do anything. Things work better when we're together than when we're working alone. We need to figure things out. In any situation, you can't really solve a problem unless you have people behind you, supporting you or encouraging you or helping you, to solve a problem. Very few problems have been solved with just like one person, right? Even if it's a good idea, it needs to get executed. And a good idea poorly executed is not a good idea usually.
And I always say, behind every good idea and behind every good person with a good idea is a chocolate lab. That's me. That's mine, because that's where I get mine from my buddy who is he's old now, but he's sure as heck.
That sounds a little Son of Sam to me, but okay.
He hasn't given me any instructions yet, so
he hasn't given you any instructions.
No, nothing yet. But he does. The poor guy. He listens when I'm reading out loud, when I just want to hear what it sounds like out of my actual out of my mouth. That poor guy has to listen. So he sits down on his little bed, grabs his Kong, and he gives me a little bit of criticism, usually by the sounds of something. But
what's the last film you criticized or critiqued? Sorry, that's the word.
Well, this year, published wise, I've moved on to Letterbox through actually another film critic here in town, Jason Harris, who actually has a really cool podcast with Joshua Bell. So they do a podcast together. So him and I have started kind of bouncing stuff off each other as far as reviews are concerned. I mean, I've written now those reviews on there. Letterboxd isn't necessarily a published site, but I mean, I still do it to practice too. So like, for example, when The Way Back came out, it was supposed to be in theaters and it got released on digital. I bought it. And again, like I did a whole, I think I wrote like, it was like a 9-page review, which was excessive. And so published wise though, it's been, let's see, I mean, I want to say it's been maybe a couple of years now at this point, just because I've obviously been pushing for, there's so much now online, everything. I mean, if I wanted to really go, I could create a blog myself. I mean, it's not just that, it's a credibility thing. So, I mean, I do it with my students and I write it down and I have them and I write reviews with them, which is a little interesting into itself, but that's their book report for my class as well. So they do film review book reports to kind of keep sharp with their writing skills as well. But that's kind of the big rub, because when you're doing this and doing that and doing the sports stuff, you almost gotta pick your poison. So, we've pulled back on the sports side a little bit just to focus on content and the podcast more specifically, just because we've gotten a much bigger following through the podcast, because it's based out of Chicago. That's a much larger audience. And so
if you ever want a guest, I love talking about movies.
Oh,
I love talking about movies. The last one I saw that I thought was fantastic is I'm Thinking of Ending Things.
That's the one from Charlie Kaufman, right? Charlie Kaufman wrote that?
Yeah, it's an amazing movie, but only, like what I said to people is, if you can sit through a David Lynch movie, you should watch this. Mm-hmm. It's not a David Lynch movie though, but if you can, then you will be able to sit through this, because it takes a while for you to wrap your brain about what's going on. But when you do, oh my God, it's like so great. It's like so great. It's a movie you want to watch like over and over and over again. It's so good. Have you seen the movie?
He wrote Magnolia, and he wrote Being John Malkovich as well. So if you want to talk about wrapping your minds around it, that's Charlie Kaufman's. He's just fantastic.
So great.
I actually watched last night on HBO. It's We Are Who We Are. We Are Who We Are. Mm-hmm. It's a miniseries on HBO about teenagers living on an army base in Italy, and it's directed and written by the gentleman that did Call Me by Your Name. And so it's very good. The first episode was last night, and I was extremely pleased, because it does have a lot of different content as far as like multiple stories, the human experience, bias. We talk about bias in a time that we live in, and when you add into that the concept of power and military, and he's the main character, he's raised by 2 moms. The mom happens to be the highest ranking official on base. And so it's just the connections, again, that human connection stuff, just like I'm sure, and I'm Thinking of Ending Things is actually on my list. I actually was supposed to go see Tenet today, but I can't find my Walter White suit to go to the theater just yet. So until I find my bubble boy, I can't go enjoy Tenet as much as I'd like to, but.
Yeah. It's funny because it's so arbitrary. I mean, there's reasons why people love movies and stuff. Like I love the movie Cinema Paradiso and very much, and I could watch it all the time. It doesn't matter. It's one of my favorite movies. And I have a good friend of mine. It's his all-time favorite movie, and my daughter's never seen it. So I tried to get her to watch it. Mm-hmm. And, I thought, it's a romantic movie, maybe she'll like it and everything. And she got super bored and it was done like halfway through, and she said, "Can I go now?" But I was like, how can you go? It's so good, but it's one of those things. I guess it's just a matter of taste that some people have, and you can't force it on people. But gosh, that feeling you get when you see a certain film, and it's just like when you read a good book and you want to share that experience with somebody. It must be hard being a film critic, because it's like you have to have that. It's so personal.
Well, I'm the worst. I'm Mr. Excitable. Whether I'm going to a movie or if I go to a new restaurant here in town, it's always it's the best thing I've ever had, because I love it. It's fantastic. But with film, I can at least maintain that. But my girlfriend makes fun of me because we go to a restaurant, and we're sitting with a food critic. We're sitting with John Curtis, who's an absolutely great food critic, and then I'll be like, this is fantastic, and he's like, it's terrible. It's terrible, Kevin. I'm like, oh, screw that guy. It was good to me, but with film, at least I'm.
It's so funny, but it's for the same. Sometimes and that's the other thing. Being a critic, it's you're usually not the most liked person when you're a critic, especially from the artist that you're criticizing. But
that's like me at Cinevegas.
Yeah,
it's a total short story, but Cinevegas back in the day, I went to see a film. It was called The Road Home. It was filmed at Basic High School. It was a baseball movie, obviously. And so me and Josh Primack were sitting in the back, and I was watching it, and I pay attention to as many details as possible. And they were using baseball equipment. The film took place in 1989, but they were using baseball equipment that I recognized that didn't come out till the mid 90s. So I was having a hard time with my suspension of disbelief. The movie wasn't great. And so I was a little vocal with Josh. I'm like, God, this was terrible. I'm like, I feel terrible for the actors that had to put themselves through it. Because John Saxon was in it. John Saxon from Enter the Dragon and Nightmare on Elm Street. Yeah. And he was in it. And I'm like, gosh, he went from, Enter the Dragon to this. And Josh goes, and he clears his throat. I'm like, what's up? And he goes, and John Saxon stands up from his seat, from sitting right in front of us, heard the entire thing. And he's like, didn't like it, huh? I'm like, to be honest, no. He's like, no harm, no foul. Nothing. I'm like, okay. I'm like, I thought he was going to rip my heart from my still beating heart from my chest or something, simply because he fought with Bruce Lee. And so I was like, oh my goodness gracious, it's Nancy's father from Nightmare on Elm Street. I can't help it. And we still tell that story as a joke today. He's like, yeah, you were terrified. The color drained from my face. But you got to wear it. You got to wear the opinion sometimes as a critic. And that's, with film especially, it's subjective. I think that we have a society today that when we look at the reviews now, I think the reviews have become less about the film and the artistic value of the film, and more about the outside factors that filter into how the movie was made. So it's not as much about the product, but about the director or the actor that's in it. And the performances, to me, are paramount. I know it's unfortunate. I feel like you can detach, and it doesn't mean that there's right actions on either side, but I do feel like you can detach from the outside stuff just to judge the product itself. You can judge the people that made it separately, but look at the product, because the product's not just one person. The product is a large group of people that came together to produce something. It's not just the director, and it's not just the writer. It's not just the producer. It's a Foley, it's a grip, it's a lighting tech. It's a lot more people that put in their time and effort on something. And I just refuse to banish their work as well, just based on, there are horrible people in the world everywhere. And so that's the big part. I think that critiquing has taken a turn a little bit, and you'll see it if a film has, if the director is not liked, it's going to get bad reviews. Mm-hmm. It has nothing to do with the product. And that's unfortunate. But that's something that, again, I always try to at least my best to, is it a good movie experience? Is the film experience great? Is it worth, in this time period, is it worth parting with a couple of dollars to go see? Is it worth, taking 2.5, 3 hours sometimes out of your life to experience? And is it worth there? Is there something that you can walk away from the theater? Sometimes you just want to turn the brain off and just enjoy, Hulk smash. But sometimes you want to go in there and you want to think about certain things that you weren't going to think about yesterday that really bring to your mind today, concepts, the idea of mortality, films, people try to kind of tend to run from mortality films because it scares them. And those are the films that have probably some of the most power. So I think that's really where film is such a powerful tool, because it's like with literature, or it's like with art, with drawing or painting, or any kind of production. You've got real insight into someone's individual soul, and somebody worked hard on that. Somebody purged something from the darkness to create. And I think that's the special aspect. I think that's why I think maybe I love film so much, is it's not just one person's purge. It's someone else's, when the cinematographer, the visuals that they can find. I love Roger Deakins, big fan of Roger Deakins. He did Blade Runner 2049 recently in 1917. I think he did. He got 2 Oscars finally after never getting an Oscar. And these are people you never hear their names because they're the cinematographer. They're the art director. They're not the director. And so those are the fun things I think with film, is that you get to really experience other people's vision as well.
So yeah, everything you're saying totally makes sense to me. I totally agree with it 100%. What's frustrating is that you have to say it. That you see, I think that's the thing that gets me a little bit. And I don't know if this is because I'm going gray, but people need to grow up, because you giving a critique of a film, it's your opinion. You're sharing an opinion. People can hear it and they can form their own opinion. I think that unless you're saying something, don't watch this film, which is just silly to say something like that. But if you give somebody your honest opinion of what you did and didn't like about it, it's up to them to kind of go ahead and make a choice, take it in and listen to it. It's all data. But it's just one of those things. People are so easily offended and threatened by things, and it's just silly. And especially, it's like art in general. It's not supposed to make everyone happy. It's not. Its job isn't to entertain you. Its job is to make you feel something. It doesn't really matter what it is, because the artist can't control you.
Mm-hmm.
You have to do it. So even a director has the intent of what he wants the audience to feel, but he has no control over it, like zero. It's on you to figure out how you're going to feel about this thing. And that's why I'm on the big, grow up kick. Come on, guys, throw yourself in, figure things out, feel something, and then move forward. The movie I love the most in sci-fi, my biggest thing, I think it's unbelievable, is Blade Runner, the original Blade Runner.
Mm-hmm.
One of my favorite films. Everything about it, I love everything about it. And then the second one came out, and I went into this thinking I have to see it, but I'm gonna hate it. And I wanted to hate it so bad, and I love it just as much as the first one.
Mm.
And that claim is so hard for me to make, but I can't help myself, because I couldn't help myself. I go, you weigh the options and you think about, what did I love about the other one? Did I get something like that out of this one? And was it still within the what's the word, milieu? Is that the right word? Of the world that we're thinking of? And it was. And it just, I felt like I was in the same world. And it was a different story, and it was a believable story. And I know it's sci-fi, but it was believable to me. And everything about it was so great. And I loved it so much. And I'm disappointed in myself for loving it as much as I did, but I can't not say I loved it. Does that make any sense?
Oh, absolutely. And what's ironic is that the director of Blade Runner 2049, if I'm not mistaken, took on a whole nother project with a touchy fan base, and he just released the first trailer for Dune.
Oh my God. Yeah. I can't wait for that.
I talk about a fickle fan base that's ready to tear it apart too. It's been 35 years or whatever since David Lynch.
David Lynch.
Yeah. And so you've got, Kyle, what's his name, is elderly at this point, and you're like, wow. So you've got Timothée Chalamet or whatever his name is playing that part, and that's going to be a hard one to do too. But the visuals, the vision, the beauty,
original Dune, I like that with Patrick Stewart and everything. It was so good. I really liked it, and it was David Lynch, so there was no holds barred, and it had a lot of gross stuff in it, like really weird, creepy, gross stuff. But it was like okay, because that world still, it felt like the stories in the book. It just, to me, and I know it's David Lynch, but it just, there was this, there's this artistic arc in Dune. There's this kind of, the world that Dune is, it's like you're in a painting.
It's beyond the surface of just a film.
Right.
There's something deeper.
It's a style. It's a particular style that I think was captured. And I know my wife does not like that movie at all. The original Dune, she hates that movie. But the second one, I saw it, and it had a bit of that feeling to it too. I mean, I saw the trailer. People are really good at making trailers nowadays.
Oh goodness, yes, yeah. Well, it reminds me of The Shining too. You take like a Stephen King, a beloved Stephen King novel, and you give it to Stanley Kubrick, who is notoriously, the most difficult director, in Hollywood, in his time. And Stephen King was like, I didn't even write that. What is that? And he takes their vision and he makes something special. And that's why I liked, there was a film that came out this past year, Dr. Sleep. It was like a romance combination. It was like it took Kubrick's film version on a date with the Stephen King novel version, and it collided them both, and out came I felt a pretty great little child of both that captured both the spirit of the Kubrick, but actually stayed true to the books. Yeah. And so some people liked it, some people didn't. I loved, again, the connections, the continued story of Danny Torrance, but also when they go to the Overlook Hotel, it kicks back and it connects the Kubrick aspect of it all too. And I just thought that was neat, how you can take one and the other and find a way to meld it so that everybody seems to be a little bit happy, but not everybody was super happy. So Kubrick fans were happy enough. King fans were extremely happy, and they were happy enough that we've got a story that kind of it closed the loop, I guess is a better way to put it, because there was a loop that was open, I guess, with the most, with how The Shining, the film, ended compared to the book. And so I thought that was kind of an interesting kind of exercise in taking one thing and another thing and just making sure and finding a way to blend two very polar opposites.
I had a kind of I don't know if it's the words pragmatic view of that movie. When I saw it, I was kind of like, I liked it. The moments that reminded me of The Shining, there were certain moments that was like, took you back to The Shining. And I was like desperate for those. I was like, oh, that's it. Especially when he said, when I was a boy, we called it the shine, he said to the little girl. And there were parts of it and everything. The vampire-ness of it was peculiar to me. But the whole thing. But after hearing your description, I think I appreciate it a little bit more now, because I think that you hit the nail on the head on that one, or hit the hammer on the nail on that one, or
hit
the nail
the
on that one.
hit the mallet on the door, as if we're gonna keep a Shining reference.
That's right. Oh yeah. You hit the axe on the chest on that one. But yeah, that was an interesting movie, but I wasn't sure how to feel about it. But yeah, I think you're right. With the way you described it, kind of made sense to me. See, that's interesting too, because a good critic can shift your perception on a thing, because you haven't allowed yourself to think too deeply about it. And sometimes it opens doors that might make you think. Okay, we're getting off topic a lot. But like, I like watching on YouTube every once in a while, when YouTube, you go into rabbit holes on things, is these reaction videos, people's reactions to things, which are just like horrible most of the time. I mean, because these are bands that I love, or it's movies that I love, and these guys are seeing it for the first time, and they're so lost, or they have no concept of a thing. But sometimes they get emotional in parts that they should be getting emotional about, or there's a thing about it that really captures them. And when that happens, it's so worth watching it to me, because to me, that's truth. When a thing is so, you felt forever, it's not something that I manifested. It's something literally that's there, that people are drawn to, right? And that's what the commonality that everybody has. Like, what is it about, Star Wars that so many people love so much, from the original movie? Was it the time it came out? Was it the the Akira Kurosawa style storytelling in it? What was it? What was it about Star Wars? Because there is young people who love Star Wars too, but when they watch the original movie, they're not super impressed, but they still love the story, right? And it's an interesting thing about films. But this turned into a film talk. I wasn't expecting it to be about films, but I think
that happened with me. Sorry about that.
No, I think that's kind of cool. I love it. I think it's great. But so you do this all the time, where you're talking to kids, and you're that are athletes and all these kinds of things. What's the kind of the takeaway that you hope they remember? Like, how, because when you're a teacher, maybe you talk to a student later on in their life when they grow older. I mean, you're still young, I feel like, but and they come back to you. They say, when you said the thing, did you have one of those experiences with anybody? I did it with my teacher. I interviewed him, Tom Dowling, where I had a chance to actually tell him what he meant to me personally, and what he did for my life, and the things that he told me that I remembered. I can't tell you how amazing it is to go to a person that literally puts you on a different path in your life, and tell them thank you. That's a huge thing. Have you had that kind of thing happen to you yet?
It comes in different forms too. It doesn't have to be, the self-congratulatory kind of thing where it's a pat on the shoulder. Sometimes it comes in the form of, hey, can I come talk to your class? I'd love to come talk to your class, because I've been there before.
Yeah,
Cassie, when she was working at the Mountain West Network, from the studio of the Mountain West network, she broadcast a full 15-minute message to the kids, and she used practically every buzzword cliche that I used in class for her 4 years that I had her. And the kids were like, I've heard that before. I've heard that before. I've heard that before. And I'm like, yes. It's not just some sort of, not just kind of just saying stuff, guys. This does work. And the big thing that I think I get most is I say, get comfortable with being uncomfortable. And anything that you do, get comfortable with being uncomfortable. There's controlled chaos in this world. If you can be comfortable being uncomfortable, you're able to work past most of life's obstacles, where you'll see the doors where everybody else sees walls. And I think that more than anything else, when I talk to not just, former students, but former players, that's probably the biggest thing that I get back from them is, you told me to get comfortable with being uncomfortable, Mr. Fiddler. And guess what? I'm comfortable with being uncomfortable. Thanks for your 4 years of chaos in your class. Now I know what discomfort is, and is, kind of as a joke, but they go in their career and they find ways to figure out solutions to problems, and they do that in that discomfort, and they're able to actually function in that. So when that happens, yes. And obviously with Chris winning the World Series, that was a little different. That was, hey coach, here's my World Series ring. And I'm like, I'm going to steal your hand now. Give me. Take it from him. And I have another guy that I coach that pitches for the New York Mets right now, Chasen Shreve. And he's like like literally the first kid I ever coached when I left the news, when I started coaching. First team, he played for me for 6 years. He came back, he played the summer before his freshman year of high school, and he came back after his freshman year of college just to hang around or whatever. And him and I are very close. And, I take great pride in Chris being, the National League MVP, but I take just as much pride in Chasen being a great husband. He's a quality guy. He's a good pitcher right now for the Mets too. But, we have a couple kids that were lawyers that are now working as lawyers now. We're like, you could have hit a game-winning grand slam in the World Series, and it still would not be as proud of you as I am for being a great lawyer. And so those are the things too that you bring back. And I think it comes in different ways. It comes, I think for me, it means most when they come back. They don't have to come back. They don't have to come back and say, come talk to you. They don't have to like sneak into, and this happens. I'm sorry, it sounds terrible. It's bad about school security, but they don't need to all of a sudden show up at my door on a random Friday just to say hi because they were home from college, or they had a day off of work and they wanted to just come say hi. That's the stuff I think that teachers really live for, is the ones that come back, that they're not just coming back because they have to be in class. They're coming back now because they really did value the time that you guys, that you work together with each other. And so that's the big moment for me. I think those are the ones that really get me. But, when they come back, when they send messages from their studio and they write, they invite our students to their screenings and give the kids passes to go do something with an event, those are really big moments for me. And now I'm getting older. So now they're actually older students. That's making me really feel old now that they're, oh, hey, Mr. Fiddler, I just turned 30. I'm like, goes from like laughter to mountain, sobbing. But that's the best part. I mean, that's, if they come back, that is a nonverbal representation that there was at least an impact in some way, shape, or form, or you just didn't screw them up. One of the two. Those are both fine by me. I always joke, I'm like, we didn't screw you up. We did our job. You made it. You survived. And because being a teenager, especially, is the most awkward time of a young adult's life. So to help kind of maneuver them through that minefield is enough, to see them finish and then go on. That's, that's the big reward. But when they come back, that's, it's not like a Stephen King movie. When they come back in a Stephen King movie, it's a totally different result. This is the good comeback. So it's always happy to see them to peep in and really pay it forward to the younger generation behind them. I call my students goobers. So the next goobers, they come in to help the next goobers along. And that's big for me because that creates tradition. And I think tradition, there's comfort there too for the next group that that this does work. So if I stick the course, I might not be in too big of trouble.
Yeah. Well, you've always been a guy who seems to, chase his curiosity, and I think it's led you to where you need to be. And I kind of come to the conclusion after talking to you that these talks have been, I think my struggle right now is that I see all these problems in the world, and I have a feeling that I'm interviewing solutions. And I think that you're definitely one of them. And I think that what you're doing with your kids and what a lot of the people I talk to, I think that there are solutions that we need to start paying attention to. And I think that the solutions need to start seeing themselves as solutions too, which I know you do because you're putting it out there. And that's the advantage of being a teacher and being able to speak to young people and having the courage and the willingness to just say, you know what, I have an idea that's pretty good. Listen to this. And some people don't think that they're qualified to do that. And I don't know anybody that isn't qualified to give good advice. Everybody has good advice to give. And, if you've got it, you should definitely give it. So thanks for all that.
Appreciate it.